The Influence of the Media by Jane Stuart Smith. Sociolinguistics appears to be at a situation which no progress is possible. Now, while experts ignore or dismiss television as a set of social factors, speakers across the globe equip themselves with ever more possibilities for watching more and more television. They also believe, unlike most linguists, that watching television affects the way they speak. This chapter will concentrate on the potential impact of the television on what are seen as core systems of language, pronunciation, and grammar. The following sections will briefly outline current views on television and language, consider possible insights from media effects research, and conclude by reviewing results from the handful of studies which exist to date, including some new results from a recent project specifically investigating the relationship between television and accent change. And myth and language change. In 1986 to 1988, Peter Trudgill argues that a key of process of language change is diffusion. Diffusion is assumed to take place through linguistic accommodation, whereby speakers may alter their speech in response to those with whom they are talking. Fits awkwardly with such a model. Although we watch television and may even talk to it, we still cannot interact with the characters in the television in such a way that accommodation is likely to take place. Thus, television may not be directly involved in process of diffusion. Trudgill admits that television may act as a source for new lexemes and idioms, as a model for speakers of a dialect to acquire the core phonology and syntax of the standard variety of a language, but here such changes require conscious motivation by speakers to orientate towards and imitate such a model. Changes taking place which are difficult to explain by diffusion. One is the appearance of F sound for in think, and another is the appearance of V sound for D in brother. This is called TH fronting. TH fronting is a feature usually associated with London accents in relatively non-mobile working-class workers and Norwich. Trudgill suggests that the change is the result of a combination of factors working together, including less overt opportunities for contact between Norwich speakers and those from London. But he also speculates about the potential role of television programs based in London in promoting positive attitudes towards London dialect features. Television may be a part of a softening up process leading to the adoption. So take note that television may be a part of a softening up process leading to the adoption of the merger of F sound with th, but it does not cause it. According to the traditional view, television may be able to influence systematic language change, but indirectly through changes and attitudes towards linguistic varieties. Milroy and Milroy in 1985 claimed that while television may increase speakers' awareness of innovations, it is less likely to promote their adoption. For example, dialect speakers of English gained greater awareness of standard varieties of English through television broadcasting, but without actually adopting features of the standard. Meaning to say, speakers of English gained greater awareness of standard varieties of English through television, but they did not actually learn its features. 29. Williams and Kirksville wondered about the potential impact of youth-oriented broadcast media, increasing exposure of these and other features as a set of youth norms. Follow-Case and Docherty in 2002 speculated that passive exposure to varieties, assuming a degree of linguistic similarity in patterning of pre-existing features, may perhaps act as a catalyst enabling speakers to redeploy resources already available to them. Kirksville, in 2002, considers the usefulness of Peter Orr's 1998 identity projection model, which allows speakers to shift their speech not only towards conversational partners who are physically present, but also towards linguistic stereotypes and information which may be drawn from sources such as television. Brandt, in 1984, writes that it is simply without argument that the broadcast media affect their audience, including their language. Rather, what is difficult is to quantify and qualify the influence exerted. Muir, in 2003, makes strong claims for exposure to German television as a key factor in current lexical and grammatical changes underway in Austrian German. Also in 2003, Lamelli cited that exposure is an agent in language change whose variationist study into post-war standardization of German dialects argues for the importance of the introduction of radio broadcasting in German households. Working with similar assumptions, German scholars, and in particular Werner Holle and his colleagues, are leading research into communicative appropriation. Communicative appropriation are ways that speakers may incorporate linguistic features from models offered by television programs into their own discourse. The possible influence of television has become another language myth since we cannot interact with television characters in the same way as with our friends, neighbors, and workmates. Represented television dialects are unlikely to affect our speech. However, there are cases that cannot be used to argue that television may not ever influence language. Looking over the wall. Insights from media effects research. According to McQuail in 2005, media, including television, are assumed to affect social behavior, though caution is advised. Mass communication does not serve as a necessary sufficient cause of audience effects, but rather functions among and through a nexus of mediating factors and influences. The role of viewers is increasingly emphasized as active interpreters of media texts who decode and negotiate meanings. While the second one is media effects research highlighted the possibility of vicarious relationships between viewers and media characters or parasocial interaction. And please take note that we should emphasize that without satisfactory evidence, such set of assumptions must be treated as entirely speculative. At the frontiers, researching the influence of the television on language. On 1981, Naro examined syntactic changes towards the standard in Brazilian Portuguese and found novellas and higher use of the standard construction. He redefined the television variable into one which represents the speaker's degree of penetration into the culture of the surrounding higher socioeconomic levels. Naro and Shear's study shows further significant correlations but with a more complex media variable, so they again refuse a causal interpretation. On 1990, Saladino found no statistical evidence to support the assumption that watching standard Italian on television was leading to standardization in the phonology of a South Italian dialect. Carvalho, on 2004, failed to find significant correlations between exposure to television and the Brazilian Portuguese feature of palatalization. However, the television indeed plays a role in the change, since the language shown on TV is admired and they want to emulate and imitate televised language. While Nara's results do not reveal whether the changes accord with speakers wanting to shift towards the speech of the novellas, Carvalho's result is a clear evidence of conscious orientation towards televised models. Note that this kind of voluntary shifting via imitation is precisely what Trudgill anticipates as the exceptional circumstances which would allow television to influence core linguistic systems. A study carried out in Glasgow allows us to return to the original problem. Here, we have another instance of non-mobile working-class adolescents showing increasing use of apparently Southern English features such as th fronting. The media themselves were swift to blame watching television, and in particular dramas set in London, such as the exceptionally popular soap EastEnders. But evidence for or against the influence of television in these changes did not exist. According to Gunter, in year 2000, the Glasgow study motivated a 3-year project inquiring into the potential influence of television on accent variation and change, which combined methods from sociolinguistics and media effects. These allow us to work with 36 working-class adolescents from Glasgow for 2 years. Early results showed differences in linguistic patterning according to the dialect of the televised stimulus, with more response to the London programs for certain speakers. Preliminary results from a large-scale multifactorial model using multiple regression confirm that television variables which capture engagement with EastEnders show significant correlations with the linguistic variables analyzed to date, namely th and dh. So take note of the following. At this stage, it is important not to overinterpret the findings. The correlation results simply indicate that there are links between television variables and linguistic variables. Causality may operate in either direction. It allows the acknowledgement that such variables have a place in the statistical and descriptive model, but not necessarily on the explanatory one. Longitudinal correlations are necessary to establish causality, and this may be difficult to achieve. Further detailed analysis of the particular components of the study and how they interrelate is necessary. The approach used is thoroughly skeptical and always attempts to maintain an appreciation of the complexity of the issues and data involved. Could watching television be responsible for a softening up process in these changes? This is an interpretation of Trudgill's speculation in terms of the potential relationship between watching television and attitudes elicited towards tape-recorded excerpts of the same passage read by similarly aged female speakers of different British urban accents, including working-class London. In a later part of the questionnaire, the researchers elicited attitudes towards London as a mental concept. Attitudes towards London accents, both real and conceptual, were varied, but on average tended to be less positive than towards urban accents. Using linear regression, the researchers tested 3 different dependent variables. 1. Attitude towards the London recording. 2. mental image of a London accent, and 3. Feelings towards London as a place. And with the following independent variables: 1. Correct identification of London recording. 2. Having relatives in the south of England. 3. Naming East Enders as favorite television program. 4. Watching East Enders. And 5. Visiting London. The only dependent variable to yield results was the attitudinal response towards the London recording. For these speakers, there were no evidence that watching or engaging with EastEnders promote positive attitudes towards a London accent. Thus, watching television promote awareness of linguistic innovations. The boys had changed little in their imitations, but close auditory analysis revealed that most had made at least slight alteration in response to the task, though not necessarily in the direction our expected London target, and therefore renamed their performance phonetic alteration. Results of the study showed that the informants were certainly aware that this character's accent was different from their own. Second is that some imitations were remarkably faithful to features of voice quality exhibited by this popular character. And lastly, there were no evidences for awareness of the specific segmental features of London English was expected. Conclusion: sociolinguists are unlikely ever to receive a definitive answer as to whether television does or does not affect core systems of language. Projects like the Glasgow Project mentioned help to move slightly closer to a better appreciation of the direction and complexity of these relationships. So that would be all, and I hope you have learned something from my PowerPoint presentation, and thank you.